Hello everyone and welcome. I'm going to make a presentation on an analysis of the concept of skepticism in the philosophy of David Hume in modern period. We begin with the introduction. This presentation deals with the concept of philosophical skepticism and how it affects human knowledge. Skepticism is an important concept in philosophy, and it is one of the problems that philosophy of knowledge has always dealt with. Virtually, it is a problem that philosophers in different philosophical historical periods have taken a serious interest in. The concept of skepticism was of particular interest and influence during the modern period, and had some of its great exponents in this period, like David Hume. The objective of this presentation is to show skepticism as a philosophical problem that philosophers have always dealt with, but also to show its development in history and show how it affects human knowledge. In order to do this, it is necessary to show the nature of skepticism and its relation to human knowledge. This presentation, therefore, seeks to consider skepticism in its peculiarly epistemological aspect, as postulated by its great exponent, David Hume. The first part of this presentation will address the concept of skepticism by defining what it is, its nature, and how it is related to human knowledge. The second part will focus on the historical development of skepticism, and the third section will delve into a discussion of skepticism in modern philosophy, focusing specifically on David Hume. Lastly, this presentation will make an evaluation of skepticism by looking at the good side of it and the bad side of it. So what is skepticism? The term skepticism derives from the Greek words skeptomai or skepsis, which mean to examine or to inquire. We distinguish between the ordinary or popular usage of the term skepticism from the philosophical one. In everyday use of the word, one is considered a skeptic when he or she doubts and refuses to accept the truth about something, or at least remains indifferent. It can be deliberate or psychological, depending on the circumstances. In ordinary circumstances, being skeptic is considered an attitude that one expresses in his or her view of reality. On the other hand, philosophical skepticism implies more than mere caution or readiness to examine problems. It is indissolubly associated with doubt, that is, the inability to form one's judgment. Doubt is therefore the skeptic's characteristic reaction in the face of a theoretical problem. Along with doubt is the tendency to question. Our minds and hearts are made for truth, and they will never settle for anything less. What is the relationship between knowledge and skepticism? Every time we think of knowledge in its various dimensions, we cannot help deal with the elements of skepticism. Epistemology, as a discipline in philosophy, asks the questions: what is knowledge? What can we know? And how can we know it? And can we know it with certainty? In carrying out this task, epistemology grapples with the skeptic who believes that no one knows anything. Right at the outset, epistemology is confronted with skepticism because skepticism doubts the very possibility of attaining knowledge and undermines all claims for it. The problem arises here because the absolute skeptic contends that man's mind is incapable of attaining truth, that we cannot know anything for an objective certainty, but we are confined to the free play of our own subjective opinions. Of all the arguments for skepticism, the ancient trilemma and the simply named argument for skepticism stands out. The former impeaches the structural integrity of justification, while the latter challenges our ability to rule out alternatives which the skeptic argues must be ruled out if we are to have knowledge. In order to affirm our possession of knowledge, a defender of knowledge must rebut these arguments, or at least undermine their intuitive appeal. Let us now focus on the historical development of skepticism. Skepticism goes back to the early period of the beginning of philosophy. Different schools of thoughts, as well as different notions, have been associated with skepticism. These include pessimism, agnosticism, empiricism, pragmatism, relativism, and intersubjectivism. The development of skepticism in the history of philosophy can be divided into 4 periods: ancient Greek skepticism, medieval skepticism, modern skepticism, and contemporary skepticism. In the early period of the beginning of philosophy, the focus was on the material world, and the attitude of skepticism is found in people like Heraclitus, who held the view that everything is in a constant state of change. Thus, nothing can be permanently accepted as true. Other skeptics of the ancient Greek period include the Pyrrhonians and academic skeptics. For instance, Socrates was a skeptic in the sense that he claimed that he knew nothing, and that anyone who thinks is wise should have such an attitude. In the medieval period, the focus was more on faith and the validity of rational proofs of God's existence. The attitude was that God is a mystery and the human mind cannot penetrate it. That is, philosophers in this period were skeptic about the human's mind capacity to penetrate the mysteries of God's existence. In the modern period, the influence of skepticism increased, and skepticism became a dominant concept in different schools of thoughts, and its major exponents like René Descartes, John Locke, and David Hume were produced in this period. This period was characterized by empiricists and rationalists. In the contemporary period, skepticism is still prevalent, but not with the radical view held by modern philosophers like David Hume. This period is characterized by existentialists, logical positivists, and analytic philosophers. Let us now look at the modern period. Skepticism in the modern period. In the modern period, as I have said, the influence of skepticism on philosophers increased greatly. It was an attitude that nearly every philosopher had to embrace. This period was characterized by an attempt to break from the traditional way of doing philosophy and to break off from all forms of dogmatism. Of particular interest among philosophers in the modern period is that they embraced skepticism with the view that the mind has to be open to something new, to scientific findings, and to philosophical intuition. In this period, the development of skepticism assumed different forms. In this period, there are skeptics who made up their minds that certain knowledge is impossible to attain. These are the extremists. There are also skeptics who were open to the possibility of attaining certain knowledge. These embraced skepticism only as a method. Of special mention here is Cartesian skepticism, which, even though rationalistic, embraced a mild skeptical attitude in its approach to knowledge. There are also skeptics who remained skeptics in the sense that they were indifferent. These were lenient to make any judgment about anything. We now focus our attention on skepticism in the philosophy of David Hume. In the modern period, David Hume is considered a great exponent of skepticism. He was born in the year 1711 and died in 1776. He is known to be a giant and great philosophical voice in the British empiricist tradition, along with John Locke and George Berkeley. He was a historian and an essayist. He is credited with the formulation of the problem of induction. The key word to understanding Hume's epistemology is the word perception. Whatever that our mind perceives depends so much on our experience and what the sense communicate to us. Even the power of imagination and the ability to come up with new ideas depend on this. To understand Hume's skepticism, it is necessary that we have an understanding of his discussion of causality and distinguish between deduction and induction. Deduction gives us certain answers. Through induction, we can only predict things by arguing inductively. We cannot say with certainty that it is true, but we can only say that it is likely to be true. Induction gives us the probable truth. Hume divides perception into impressions and ideas. He makes a further division of impression into sensation and reflection. On this background, his theory of human understanding is founded. The logical consequence of this is that, according to Hume, we cannot accept anything as true unless it is subjected to empirical verification. Moreover, this implies that we cannot so much rely on our ideas because we do not always have the same feeling and sensation. The reality that we perceive today is likely to turn out to be something else tomorrow. According to Hume, we cannot establish a rationally justified ground for belief in causation. We make prediction that a particular cause will eventually give a particular effect based on some experience we have had in the past. Hume maintained that there is no uniformity here because no past experience can guarantee that a future event will resemble the past. In this way, he proved himself to be a skeptic. Evaluation and conclusion. In conclusion, we must say that skepticism must be accepted as a human, philosophical, and epistemological problem. The tendency to embrace or have an attitude of uncertainty or lack of conviction towards certain claims of knowledge is natural. We can be skeptical about certain claims for a number of reasons. There is strength in skepticism, and through Hume's skeptical arguments, he was able to postulate a scientific method which relies on observation. This opens up the mind to possibilities we would otherwise not consider. Indeed, in the pursuit of knowledge, there are pitfalls. There is a potential for producing false results. But it was wrong of Hume to take refuge in skepticism, disproving all instances in which the prediction was true. What we need is a healthy skepticism, that is, one which can be thoughtful, balanced, and persuasive as the basis for attaining truth. The goal is to find the truth. Doubt should be the beginning, means and way to attain the truth, but not the end. Thinking about the world, our place in it and what we value, why and what we should do about it, we cannot embrace the attitude of an absolute skeptic. Absolute skepticism is a hindrance to the progress of philosophy. The object of philosophy ought to be not only the disproving of certain claims, but also, and more importantly, the affirming of those which guide us on the path to truth. Philosophy has to be positive. Hume ought to affirm a positive position of himself. It is important to make a return to Socrates, who said that we know nothing, but he was optimistic that we have to be open to learning every day. Thank you for watching this presentation.